to anything that might be appropriate in regards to what Stepp Lab does. So enjoy. Yeah, thank you, Megan.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Brett. My name's Megan. I'm from the Boston University Stepp Lab. I see some familiar faces who have either participated in our research or some of you might have been at the presentation. I think I gave June 2021. Time is all over the place when you start thinking about those years. But we at the Stepp Lab do research on voice disorders, and that includes changes in voice for people with Parkinson's disease. So I'm here to tell you a little bit more about voice changes. If you attended the first presentation, some of this is going to be a little update and reminder, but also I have some slides at the end that actually show some recent results from some of our publications. So hopefully that's interesting. I'm going to pass around some flyers just while I talk if you want to grab one for later, or if you have any questions after, happy to help. Before I start, we're really close. I just want to put a little plug. We're always looking for people with Parkinson's, but we're about 6 or 7 people away from finishing one of our studies to have a full project for one of our PhD students who's wrapping up her dissertation. And with COVID, we had a little bit of a halt on her 6-year journey. So we're just kind of also coming back to places we've been that have been really supportive to see if there's any new interest or any additional questions we can help answer in person as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass out the flyers, and then you just want to pass them back on the rows, and then I'll take them back by the computer in the center for you, or you can just put them on the floor on the aisle. Is it okay if I start with you here? Okay, if I start here.
What is the area of expertise?
Sorry?
The area of expertise.
Her area of thesis is on mainly looking at changes in voice with Parkinson's disease. I forget the whole dissertation name, it has a lot of words. I do have it, I can tell you what her area is specifically. I'm going to pop back here just to click through the slides, but if you have a question, I can answer it either during or we can go back to it after, but feel free to raise your hand. I think I can see everyone from where I am. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm the lab manager at the Stepp Lab for Sensorimotor Rehabilitation Engineering, and I graduated in January 2021 with my bachelor's in science in speech language and hearing, and have been with the lab since fall 2019, so I'm going on almost 4 years with the research lab. Just a little bit about what we're going to go over. I'll keep it as brief as possible, but also be as informative as possible if anybody's interested. But I know you just all worked out really hard, so I don't want to keep you too long. Okay. We'll just go over how typical voice works, how aging can affect that, how Parkinson's disease can further change the voice, and then just go over a little bit about our current research on voice and Parkinson's disease. All right, this is a really fancy looking slide, but the 3 main functions of the larynx, which is in your neck, in your throat, is for swallowing, breathing, and making sound. When you swallow, your epiglottis closes, and that's what allows the food to go down your esophagus and not your windpipe. We breathe out through our lungs, which connects up through the larynx, out our mouth. And then for phonation, when you add the lungs with vibrating your vocal folds, and then it goes through your mouth in all different areas and using articulators like your tongue, your jaw, etc. That's what makes different sounds, is what we interpret as speech. And this diagram is just giving a in-time view, showing there on the right the air going up through, phonating the larynx, the vocal folds here, and up and out your mouth, and that's what you would hear as sound. So a typical voice, when your vocal folds close, that's when you're making sound, that's when they're vibrating, and when they're open, that's just your resting state breathing, which you're all doing now, and mine are currently closed every time I'm talking. For a typical healthy vocal cord, you expect them to be a big V shape, and they should be white and straight. When you exhale, those vocal folds vibrate and they strike each other to produce that sound. If anybody's interested at the end, I have an endoscopy video, which is showing the scope down the nose, which is giving like an up-close view of the vocal folds actually vibrating. If anybody wants to see that at the end, I'm happy to play it. So as we age, our voice changes. This starts from puberty, when you're little, either a boy or a girl, and your voice might be a little higher, and then as you age as a male, your voice drops. And even females, our voices change up and through our 20s especially. I'm actually a peak example right now of vocal change. Around 25 to 30, your voice really starts to shift and mature even further than from when you were in your teens. And then the older you get, the structures that power and surround the voice box begin to change. So the muscles change, which might impact your power of exhalation. So your lungs, the muscles around your lungs might get a little weaker and might be harder to exhale as big or as long. And the vocal cords themselves can change. There's also some more acute factors, like environmental factors, like smoking and acid reflux for long periods of time. And then a more acute change is fatigue. That can happen if you give a presentation or you're at a social event, maybe at a holiday dinner with family, and you're all talking over each other, and then the next day you're having a hard time getting your voice out, and that can be from vocal fatigue, but that usually goes away after a day or two. Voice changes can affect many parts of your life. Most importantly, talking to people around you, and it might impact how they understand you as well. So for some people, this may feel emotional or depressed because of these changes in their voice. And knowing how and why the voice changes the way it does is the first step in figuring out new ways to live with a changing voice. For long-term impacts, which I would say, seeing a physician or an SLP can always help. There's a few reasons why people might experience voice disorders. The first is from structural changes. So those are actual physical changes to the vocal folds. That can be from nodules or polyps. And that's an actual physical structure that's on the vocal fold that's keeping that vibration from fully happening. The other type of voice disorder is neuromuscular. It's from neuromuscular changes. And that's when there's a disconnect between the nervous system and the physical structure of the voice box, which is what happens in neurologic disorders like ALS and Parkinson's disease. So for today, we'll just focus on these neurophysiological causes. So with Parkinson's disease, there's a depletion of specific neurotransmitters in the brain. That can lead to a loss of dopamine, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, and that leads to changes in the motor control, which can impact limb movements. But it can also extend to areas of speech, like your movement of tongue, jaw, etc. Loss of other types of neurotransmitters can impact the non-motor functions, which are also essential to life and also speech in ways. Your sensory systems, so your ability to hear yourself back is imperative in speaking, so that is impacted there. Changes to sleep, bowel function, etc. And through research, we know that non-motor function changes can actually precede motor changes by many years. So that's an impact in diagnosing Parkinson's disease as well. So these changes in motor control are often targeted by using dopaminergic medications like carbidopa, levodopa. And these gross motor control deficits in Parkinson's disease are linked to the dopamine loss, and that can extend to tremors, often in extremities, rigidity in muscles leading to postural changes, and others. A little extending details here on non-motor function, that loss of smell, sleeping disorders, visual changes, pain and cramping, etc. So when we talk about speech, we went over this a little bit, but this is just a comprehensive slide. So for speech, you use both motor and non-motor function. We think a lot about that motor function. Like right now, I'm talking, I'm using my lips, my tongue. I'm acutely aware of every time that my tongue is wrong and I'm saying something incorrectly. And that's actually my non-motor function that's allowing me to hear that myself. So that's me hearing myself back. So whenever I say, you're trying to say cat and you say tat, automatically you're hearing that back and you're making changes. So that's actually your non-motor and your motor systems working together. So that sensory function really impacts how we hear ourselves and what we feel in our vocal tract when we're speaking. With Parkinson's disease, there are specific changes that we know of, like reduced volume, so overall speaking a little softer, reduced fluctuation in vocal pitch, so perhaps being told that you sound more monotone or have less emotion in your voice, and changes to your voice quality, like increased hoarseness. So these speech symptoms vary greatly and take on really different forms. As I kind of alluded to earlier, we have these different functions, these respiratory, laryngeal, which is really just saying your voice function, and articulatory function. And your articulatory function is the movement of your articulators, which extends to your tongue and lips. So your speech can vary greatly. So any changes in the respiratory.
Yeah. So just a quick one on this slide. Oops. These speech symptoms, so you can change your respiratory, so your breathing. You might need to take more breaths during speech. That voice function, having vocal tremor or a softer voice, and changing the articulatory functions like the tongue and lip, which can reduce what we call clear speech. So it can lessen the articulation between vowels and consonants and perhaps make it harder for people to understand the speech that's coming from someone. So speech in Parkinson's disease, as of current research, does not show clear improvements with dopaminergic medication. And given this wide range of speech problems, which also have individual variability and minimal benefit from this dopaminergic medication, individualized treatments are necessary to improve communication for people with Parkinson's. It's kind of where the Stepp Lab's area of research comes in, is looking at this area. Our lab was started in 2011 by Dr. Kara Stepp, who's circled up there. And the lab is focused on informing assessment and treatment of sensorimotor disorders. To clarify now, there's no direct benefit of our research. It's not clinical, nor is it medication research. So there's no direct benefit, but the aim of our observational and behavioral research is on informing assessment and treatment of sensorimotor disorders for doctors and clinicians. We apply techniques from fields of electrical engineering, computer science, neuroscience, laryngology, speech science, communication disorders, all over the place. I work with so many talented and smart people from so many different areas. 7.6% of Americans have a voice disorder, and I believe right now the current stat is that every 6 minutes somebody's diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and it's the second most common and growing diagnosis of a neurological disorder. So ongoing and future research can help prevent and treat voice disorders by forming these new assessments and treatments. And a minute to that. I think Parkinson's disease is the second second fastest growing disorder now, based on more recent publications than what's listed here. And many research labs, including ours, study voice and speech in Parkinson's disease to provide increased quality of life for individuals with Parkinson's disease. So, as I said, our research doesn't have any direct benefit, which can often dismay people and turn them away from the research. So I've added in this little bit just to hopefully show a little bit about how much people's participation in the research really does help, and what we are publishing very, very actively. So these are just an overview quickly of some recent publications from the lab. And I'll just quickly go over this paper, which is a review study done by one of our researchers, Defna Abur, et al. From our lab to understand and summarize research on swallowing and communication dysfunction with Parkinson's disease. Now, does anybody here have any type of research, medical, any type of background? A few. So hopefully this doesn't look too wacky, but this is a publication this is a picture taken directly out of the publication. I'll tell you what's important from it. I'll send this presentation over so you can stare and look at this as much as you'd like. It's a little confusing, but I'll try to explain. So this is showing the progression of symptoms through Parkinson's disease. Starting from on the left here, let me see if I can find my cursor. On the left here, the 2 to 5 range, the 3 to 6 range, 4 to 12 years, and 8 years and beyond. So this line here, this dotted line of diagnosis, is showing where in this symptom progression Parkinson's disease is typically diagnosed. So here we're seeing that these sleep disruptions, changes in mood, depression, constipation, this early motor stage of fatigue, pain, happens earlier than this diagnosis point, which is showing that this is about where the motor symptoms really start to tick up with tremor. But the real dopaminergic neurons are lost sooner than where the diagnosis occurs. This is a bit of a summary. It's also a bit much to read, but I'll go over it a bit too. This is taken directly from the publication as well. So prior research from our lab indicated that individuals with Parkinson's may have hyperactive feedback as a compensatory mechanism. So what does this mean? This hyperactive feedback, I think if you recall, I mentioned earlier about that feedback that we hear from our own voices, so how we're hearing ourselves speak. And so for people with Parkinson's, what our research showed was that this hyperactive feedback is actually a compensatory mechanism. And so for people with Parkinson's, if it's hyperactive, that means that what you think people think they're hearing, people with Parkinson's think they're hearing their speech louder than it actually is. So that can be a contributing factor to why people with Parkinson's might speak at a softer volume more frequently and be asked to speak louder, even though they think they might be shouting or speaking really loud already. The rest of this chart is showing different symptoms relating to breathing, those respiratory with your lungs, your voice functions, articulation and resonance, the amount of prevalence that people with Parkinson's might experience them, or the prevalence that people with Parkinson's have these symptoms. And then over on the rightmost side is what those symptoms look like. So for example, a respiratory symptom would be decreased breath capacity, so having to take more frequent breaths, changes in voice, impaired prosody, which impacts sounding more monopitch, as I mentioned earlier, not having as much fluctuation between words and sounds, articulation, a smaller range of movement in your mouth, which can make it harder for people to understand you, and you might be asked to repeat yourself more often. And then finally, which has possibly the lowest rate of prevalence, is these resonance changes, which can change how nasal your voice might sound a little more nasal to people than previously. Any questions on this? Anybody have a question? No? Sure.
Is it impacted by dehydration?
Dehydration in general can definitely have major impacts on your voice. For any voice therapy or anything else, one of the first things people will always recommend is increased hydration. And it definitely, so dehydration would definitely worsen any of these symptoms.
Seeing why this slide, you have high subglottal pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me some more about that?
Yes, I'll do my best. So that high subglottal pressure, sorry, does not surprise me. I'll try to speak a little louder. So that in high subglottal pressure is going to, I think, impact just the actual voice production. So it coming out a little more strangled, or having a harder time actually speaking. Did I miss anyone? Yep.
So I have some issues with swallowing, and is that part of this study, or is that a different study?
We have done studies in the past on some swallowing. Right now, we don't have any studies actively looking at swallowing.
So this doesn't encompass any of that.
This does not currently encompass, our current study does not currently encompass swallowing, but we are actually about to start a new study in a few months that will be looking at swallowing. Yeah, that one will have a few more swallowing aspects. This specific project that we're doing now doesn't.
Okay, cool.
But we have changing studies every few months, years, so there's always potential for swallowing, and like I said, this new one should have it. Alright, so moving on, just to wrap things up, our lab is located in Kenmore Square in Boston. Our compensation is actually $30 per hour. I missed that revision in my PowerPoint, apologies. So we do compensate $30 per hour, and we do cover parking as well as transportation to the lab. So we'll cover an Uber cost, or if you have a caregiver who wants to come with you, we'll cover the cost of gas mileage as well. I think we've had.
They have a limit on the window.
Sorry?
They have a limit on the window.
Right now, probably no. But we've had people, I think, somebody from 110. I don't think. Did you Uber?
Because you had to take the medication.
Yes.
And then you go about driving.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, you should have put those places.
Yeah. Did you Uber?
I drove.
You drove, and then so we had the parking pass. Yeah.
But you couldn't do that usually.
That's
And
one.
the medication, you said I showed her.
Oh yeah. I'll explain the study. There's a medication and a non-medication option. For some, chose to do non-medication, felt fine driving non-medication, preferred not to drive non-medication. That study is a full day study, and then, I turned off.
Come back.
Hopefully not before I finish. I'll explain the studies. There's a few options. But yeah, so from here, it took me like 40 minutes. 2 hours is probably the maximum. But by that point, you're looking at like the other side of Massachusetts almost.
So you guys near the, I can't see that too well, is that? Kenmore Square.
Oh yeah, Kenmore Square right by Fenway, which nowadays with baseball season is kind of a mess for parking. So we do have parking passes, and then in this time of year, sometimes Uber can just be best because then you don't have to worry about it. All right. So a little bit about the current studies, as some previous participants have alluded to. You'll be asked to, these are the tasks you may be asked to complete. Speech production, your voice is recorded using a microphone, and Then there's some other speaking tasks where you'll also be wearing headphones. You'll be asked to complete self-reporting skills, like the voice-related quality of life survey, communication effectiveness survey, as well as the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, which I know is oftentimes done by neurologists, if anybody's familiar with having done that assessment. And then you'll also complete some listening tasks. We have different tiers of studies. Our most complex study right now, it's a pretty much full day. It's a 6-hour study. There's one 3-hour part in the morning, and then you do the study again in the afternoon. If you take carbidopa-levodopa and have been on the same prescription for 6 months and feel comfortable and you want to go off medication, you do that first part in the morning without medication. You have lunch, take your medication, and then you do it again in the afternoon. So that's our most intense, complicated. For that study, we're looking at the effects of medication on changes in voice, which right now has been really interesting. And so far, our most popular study, which pleasantly surprised us. The second study is basically the same thing, you just don't go off medication. You do a 3-hour, 1-part study on your medication, no changes. You just do everything, no changes to medication, and that's it. That one can also be done if you wanted to maybe spend the day in Fenway and wanted to come with a friend. Somebody could do the morning, somebody could do the afternoon, something like that. If you both just wanted to do the 1 part. And then the final one is we just collect voice samples. So if you just want to come into the lab, if you're a little more local and don't want to make the trek, that one's a little shorter, about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. But we also are about to start a new study, which is a rather complex but exciting NIH-funded study. All of our research is, but that one's going to be up and coming in the next few months as well, which I think we'll be looking at swallowing. There'll be a scoping component, which will be optional. You don't have to do it, but the idea of that is to actually look at the physiological changes to the vocal folds. But to clarify, right now, our studies do not include that for our Parkinson's disease research. It's just voice samples, as well as one little part where there's a balloon that inflates at random intervals, once on 1 part on your neck, 1 part between your teeth. It's a little, there's a bit of discomfort just as you get used to it. It's a weird sensation, but it doesn't hurt at all. Hopefully anybody here who participated can attest to that as well. Yeah. It's not too bad. It's just a little weird. You don't often have things inflating on your neck. So that's the only thing. But that's our 2 main studies right now. Like I said, it can be as complex as you're willing and also as simple. You come, you can record your voice, you do some other things, answer these surveys, which actually have a virtual component as well. So we can do a lot of that over Zoom before you even come in person. And then it's 3 hours in person. So around total, it's about 4 hours of compensation for this study, plus covering transportation and parking. Or parking. Any questions on our current research studies that I can answer for anyone? All right.
How much longer will this one go on?
This one will go on. So this one's going to keep going on at least until like September, October, November. For the dissertation, we're hoping to get, right now we need 7 more females with Parkinson's and 3 more males with Parkinson's. The dissertation research is hopefully concluded by June, but we will publish on this study as well, and that will be ongoing until we reach the numbers that we need, which is normally 15 females. Well, normally it's 30 females, 30 males, for a nice, large, statistically valid study. All right, well, this is pretty much the end of my components. Unless anybody has any questions for me, I'm also going to be here if you want to follow up. If you grab the flyer, feel free to either call or email. You can also give your information to me personally if you prefer, or you can use that QR code as well to fill out our screening form. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can contact you through that as well. Otherwise, I can call if you're interested. We can go over questions on the phone or do it now if you have time and you want to. But otherwise, this slide has our information. And then just as always, want to note other areas too where you can always find more research opportunities if you like participating in research. Researchmatch.org, Michael J. Fox Trial Finder, as well as Parkinson's Disease Foundation sometimes posts their research, does all sorts of events. Did anybody do the PD cycle event with Parkinson's Foundation
Yeah.
last month?
Yeah.
Yeah, did you all do that? Nice. I did it too. It was intense. it was intense. I did it up in South Boston. It was great though. So yeah, always opportunities to get involved. We love coming to these things. Thank you so much for listening. It's wonderful for me and for our lab to be able to connect with the community and learn more about Parkinson's disease, as well as share the information about our research that we're doing to hopefully help further assessments from doctors and clinicians as well.
Do you do anything with vocal cord dysfunction?
We do.
PDFM?
I think. Yeah. Nothing maybe right now like written down, but
Do you have much experience? I'm just wondering if you can know.
I don't think I have as much experience or enough clinical knowledge to fully